My name's Gerald, I'm 62, and last Thanksgiving, I walked into my sister's lakefront home in Michigan, 38 minutes late on purpose. I figured I'd sneak in once everyone was 2 glasses into the Pinot Grigio and too full of stuffing to notice. I was wrong. The moment I opened that door, the one I used to charge through as a teenager, everything changed. The laughter paused just for a beat. Enough to notice. Smiles were there, sure, but the warmth wasn't. I was a shadow in a room where I once belonged. My sister-in-law, Denise, made her way over in heels far too high for hardwood floors, arms outstretched like we were best friends. "There he is," she sang, her perfume clinging to every syllable. "We were just talking about you." No, they weren't. I let her give me that polished, distant hug while my eyes scanned the room. Across the living area, my nephew Bradley was the center of attention, holding a crystal tumbler of something expensive and laughing with my uncles like he'd earned that spotlight. He lifted his drink in my direction, a lazy toast from someone who barely acknowledged me growing up. And then I saw Claire, my niece, my daughter's age, near the charcuterie board, picture perfect in a cream sweater, throwing her head back in laughter. Like she belonged. I didn't. I hadn't in years. Not since my parents reallocated my college savings to pay for Bradley's business degree and quietly scrubbed me from the family photo wall during their remodel. The house didn't look like the one I grew up in. The walls had been repainted. My mother's old cross-stitch samplers gone, replaced by abstract art and gold-accented decor. Even Thanksgiving looked Instagram-ready, name cards in calligraphy, glittering gourds as centerpieces. It felt more like a magazine spread than a family gathering. No one asked about me. I expected that. Then Denise tapped her wine glass with a butter knife. "Before we eat," she announced, "I just want to say how grateful I am for family. This year's been tough, and yet we've come out stronger, more united." I sipped my lukewarm cider and waited for the punchline. Denise's eyes swept the room, landing on me just long enough to sting. "Let's raise a glass to those who contribute, and even to the ungrateful ones." The room erupted in polite laughter. My stomach turned. I didn't look around. I didn't have to. I knew exactly who she meant. And no one said a word. They just clinked glasses and drank. I didn't touch the cider. Just stared down at my untouched slice of pumpkin pie, thinking about how I should have stayed home with my dog and a frozen dinner. Across the table, my brother Hank cleared his throat and jumped tracks like he always did. "All right, folks," he said, voice too cheerful. "We've got roast turkey, cornbread stuffing, sage stuffing, oyster stuffing. Let's dig in before it gets cold." Classic Hank. Keep the peace. Gloss over the cracks. Just another Thanksgiving for the Whitmore family. I offered a faint smile. The kind that doesn't reach your eyes. Dessert came and went, and by then, Denise had switched from Chardonnay to something red and bolder. 3 glasses deep, her tongue started loosening. "You know," she said, waving her fork in the air, "I bet Gerald spends most nights with his crossword puzzles in that old mutt of his." She laughed like it was a compliment. "When he's not giving lectures at the senior center, of course." My jaw tightened. I didn't look up. That's when Bradley leaned in, whiskey in hand and grin already cocked. "Saving the world one grumpy Facebook post at a time, right, Uncle G?" A few chuckles trickled down the table. Polite. Measured. But it didn't matter. The message was clear. That's how this family operates. Not behind your back, but right to your face. And if you bristle, you're too sensitive. I took a long sip of water, my hands steady even if something in my chest cracked a little. I looked around the dining room. Every detail picture perfect. New light fixtures. Neatly arranged gallery wall. But not a single photo of me. Not from my military retirement, not from my volunteer work. Nothing. But Bradley? His face was everywhere. College graduation. Real estate awards. A golf tournament win with Dad. His accomplishments were legacy. Footnotes. I'd learned the hard way not to speak up. When I did, the script played out like a rerun. Hank's tired sigh, Denise's syrupy pity, Bradley's smirk. And Claire? Silent. Boys. They had their roles. And I had mine, the black sheep. The one who didn't quite fit. But this time, something was different. Not anger. Not grief. Silence. Clear. I didn't belong here, and for the first time that didn't feel like a loss. It felt like clarity. I raised my glass, not to them but to myself. To the peace of finally letting go. I set it down gently. No one noticed. But I did. Never again. Or maybe they did notice and chose not to care. Either way, I was done expecting acknowledgement. Hank stood slowly, clearing his throat and tapping the edge of his wineglass with the back of a fork. The room fell quiet with the kind of silence only decades of routine can command. Before dessert, he said, looking forward but never at me, I'd like to share a few thoughts. Here we go. It's Thanksgiving after all, he continued, his voice full of conviction. And family is the cornerstone of legacy. Of course. And legacies, he said, pausing for emphasis, don't just happen. They're built, through sacrifice, commitment, loyalty. Denise nodded like a politician's wife, hands clasped neatly in her lap, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. We've made decisions recently to protect what we've worked for. To ensure the future of this family, our values, our name, are carried forward by the right hands. And just like that, I felt the floor tilt beneath me. He talked about Bradley's real estate firm opening new branches across the Midwest. About Claire's wine bar winning some local gem award. He praised their shared vision and deep commitment to the family legacy. But he never mentioned me. Not my law firm built from the ground up with years of sacrifice. Not my volunteer work with veterans. Not my name. Not even once. And those who choose to distance themselves, Hank added, turning slightly now, shouldn't expect the family to walk alongside them. Bradley smirked, slow and smug, like he'd been rehearsing this moment. Claire kept her gaze fixed on the half-eaten apple pie in front of her. No one spoke up. No one said, "Wait, what about Gerald?" Because silence is easier than conflict. And they had already made their choice. Then, as if the evening hadn't twisted the knife enough, Denise stood and clapped her hands together. "We have a little surprise," she beamed. "A video tribute. 40 years of Whitmore family memories." The room darkened. A projector whirred to life. The screen lit up with grainy photos. Hank in uniform, Denise beaming during her baby shower, Bradley in cleats, Claire at her recital. But not me. Not one single picture. Not until a wide group shot near the end. One backyard barbecue a decade ago. I was barely visible, out of focus, standing behind everyone else like some unpaid extra in a movie I never asked to be in. A small voice piped up from the far end of the table. A child, maybe one of Bradley's or Claire's. "Who's that man in the back?" My chest tightened. I curled my hands beneath the linen napkin to keep them from shaking. I wasn't forgotten. I was erased. This wasn't an oversight. It was surgical, deliberate. The lights came back on. Polite applause echoed through the dining room. The projector shut off. No one looked at me. They all moved on. I sat there, still as stone, surrounded by polite smiles that felt like scalpels, each one slicing a little deeper. Conversations resumed, laughter rang out again, and for a moment, it was as if nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just witnessed myself being scrubbed from the family's history. I excused myself quietly and slipped into the bathroom. The mirror didn't reflect sadness. It showed something colder. Not rage. Recognition. They didn't ignore me by accident. They ignored me because acknowledging me meant acknowledging what they'd done, what they'd taken. This wasn't about a missing photo or an unspoken name in a toast. This was about erasure, page by page, year by year, until I wasn't even a footnote in the story they tell themselves. When I returned to the table, the pumpkin pie had already been served. Neatly sliced, topped with whipped cream, pristine and perfect, like everything else in this manufactured illusion of togetherness. No one noticed I'd been gone. I picked up my fork and stared at the pie. I couldn't taste a thing. While they laughed and passed compliments around like dinner rolls, I sat still. A single thought looped through my mind. I'm not one of them anymore. Maybe I never was. I set the fork down, excused myself once more, quieter this time, and walked down the hallway to the guest room. They still called it the office, but it was little more than a forgotten futon and a dusty printer no one ever used. I sat down, heels still on, staring at the beige carpet. And then the memories started. Another night like this. My law school graduation. I walked across the stage alone. While others had cheering parents, siblings waving signs, even old friends with shaky phone cams, I had an empty chair. Later, Denise said, "Oh honey, we had reservations for Bradley's birthday. He's only 30 once." That was the night I learned exactly where I stood. Below convenience. Even now I can still hear the applause, hollow, echoing, for someone who had no one there to clap. Then I hit send. The morning sunlight spilled across my apartment in that warm, forgiving way that makes even worn-out furniture seem softer. But it didn't touch the cold weight in my chest. I stared at my phone like it might change something. The silence after my message grew heavier with each hour. Then it rang. Clear. My thumb hovered. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail, to let her words disappear into the ether like mine always had. But something stubborn inside me clicked on. Maybe I needed to hear what she'd say. Maybe I wanted to give her one last shot at decency. Hey, she said, too cheerful, too light. Like she hadn't just sat there through my erasure the night before. Just wanted to check in, see how you're feeling after, the big dinner? I let out a single laugh. Flat, empty. Is that what we're calling it? Dinner. She paused. A bit too long. Look. I know it got weird. You knew. I cut her off. Don't pretend you didn't. Silence stretched on the line. Then a quiet sigh. Yeah. I knew. I've known for a long time. My eyes shut. That admission, soft, casual, hit harder than I expected. And you said nothing. What was I supposed to do, Gerald? Start a war? It wouldn't have changed anything. I just wanted peace. Peace, I repeated. That old familiar word. No, I said, my voice calm. You didn't want peace. You wanted comfort. And with that I ended the call. Not in anger. Just done. Done hoping someone might finally grow a spine. 2 hours later I stood outside Delphine's door. She opened it before I could knock. You came, she said, like it was a fact, not a surprise. Her voice was steady, grounded, like she'd been waiting for this moment for years. Inside, her living room looked like a time capsule. Dusty shelves, faded photos, a letter in my mother's script hanging in a crooked frame. I kept everything, Delphine said, walking to a wooden box beside the bookcase. Because I knew one day you'd come looking. He handed me a folder. Inside, bank transfers. 2 weeks before Bradley's big real estate launch. Documents, signatures, proof. And then, my mother's original will. Clear as day. The fund was for my education and not to be touched under any circumstance. My vision swam. And this? I asked, holding up a yellowed sheet of lined paper. Notes, she said. Things I wrote down after talking to your father. It started when he began rewriting the past like a speech he'd practiced. And no one corrected him. You never said anything, I told Delphine. You weren't ready, she replied, calm and certain. But now. I think you are. I didn't cry. Thought I might. But what I felt wasn't grief. It was something heavier. Like truth had mass and it had finally landed in my hands. Back home I cleared off my kitchen table and laid out the documents. The morning light from my window cast long shadows across every page. I scanned each one, checking signatures, confirming dates. There was no room left for doubt. This wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't carelessness. It was orchestrated. They didn't just push me aside, they removed me. Piece by piece. Decision by decision. Memory by memory. I opened my laptop, brought up my old legal notes and started building a timeline. Not to get back at them, but to remember. To write it down page by page the way it really happened. They wanted peace. But I wanted the truth. And for the first time in years I felt steady. No racing thoughts. No shame. Just clarity. I didn't know where it would lead. But I knew one thing. Whatever came next, I'd be the one authoring it. 2 mornings later, an envelope slid under my apartment door. No knock. No greeting. Just silence and pressure, wrapped in a courier's sleeve. Inside, a letter cream-colored and cold. From Denise's legal assistant. The tone was formal, overworked. Like someone trying to sound gracious while sliding a knife between your ribs. In the interest of maintaining family harmony, it read, Mr. Gerald Whitmore is invited to voluntarily step away from matters related to the family trust and estate planning. Such a gesture would reflect goodwill and an understanding of broader family dynamics. Cool. Understanding. Soft words for hard things. I read it once. Then again. Then I printed a copy, picked up a pen and signed. Below the signature line in my own handwriting I added, I don't want a cent from people who never wanted me. No performance. No attorney. No audience. Just the truth. I folded the letter and set it on the table. And then my mind, uninvited, drifted back to a different kind of envelope. 2 years ago, I was in court when Denise's name lit up my phone. The text was short. Your mom had a stroke. We're at St. Luke's. No urgency. No emotion. Just cold, transactional news. By the time I made it to St. Luke's, the nurses were already changing the linens. I never got to say goodbye. A quiet nurse in blue scrubs glanced up at me, her voice gentle. She kept asking if you were coming. Those words have never left me. They echo every time I pass that hospital, every time I hear a text ping that comes too late. I walked out of that sterile hallway knowing I'd lost 2 people that day, my mother, and any last illusion I had about this family. That night Denise called. Her voice was cool, efficient. It was one of those things, she said. I didn't think it was that serious. And you were tied up with court, right? And Hank? He never said a word about it. Never looked me in the eye afterward. As if grief had a statute of limitations. Like her death was just another item on the family's agenda. I've forgiven a lot in my life. Truly. But not that. Never that. Back in the present, I stood by my apartment window with the signed waiver still in hand. The city outside rolled on. People walking dogs. Light traffic humming over damp streets as rain began to mist the sidewalks. I pressed my fingers to the paper. It didn't feel like surrender. It felt like release. For years I believed letting go would make me weak. That walking away meant losing. I was wrong. Staying would have broken me. Leaving? That saved me. I slipped on my coat, walked the 2 blocks to the courthouse mailbox and dropped the envelope in. No return address. No tracking number. Just finality. I didn't look back. Didn't pause. I went home, made tea and sat in silence. And for once the silence didn't ache. It was mine. 3 days after Thanksgiving, I sat across from my attorney in a quiet, glass-walled office. Between us sat a yellow legal pad, covered in notes I hadn't known I'd been collecting for years. Receipts. Statements. Dates. Patterns. She leafed through the folder of documents. Delphine's records, the original will, the bank logs that told the rest of the story. This isn't a lawsuit, she said, tapping her pen against the final page. This is a statement. I nodded, leaning back in the chair. Then let's make it loud. No smile. No dramatics. Later that afternoon I opened my laptop. 1 email. 1 message. But it would land like thunder. To every blood relative still breathing. Every in-law who ever smiled through betrayal. Every lawyer and advisor who helped file away the truth. I addressed them all in 1 email. Subject: thought you should see this. Attached were 4 PDFs. Bank statements with highlighted transfers, a scanned copy of my mother's original will, screenshots of Bradley's company launch timeline, and the guest list from that tribute video. My name conspicuously absent. No extra words. No summary. I hit send. And walked away. 10 minutes later my phone lit up like Christmas morning. Cousins. Aunts. Even an uncle I hadn't heard from since the Reagan administration. Is this real? Why didn't you tell us sooner? I always had a feeling something was off. I ignored them all. Hank. Radio silence. No message. No call. Nothing. Silence had always been his tool of choice when control started to slip. But Denise? He came through just like I knew she would. Her response was short and sharp. This is a family matter. Please retract. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just polished condescension wrapped in etiquette. The Queen issuing orders while the castle burned behind her. I didn't reply. Bradley? He disappeared altogether. No calls. No texts. Not even his usual passive-aggressive motivational quotes on Facebook. Complete blackout. Which meant one thing: he was scared. Good. That night I shut off my phone and poured myself a glass of red wine. The city outside was quiet, headlights streaking across rain-slicked pavement. I wasn't pacing. I wasn't even angry. I was ready. At my lawyer's suggestion we began drafting a formal complaint. Not to start a lawsuit. Not for money. For sunlight. Because truth when exposed stops festering. And this family's rot had gone deep enough. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about restoration. And this was the first match on dry kindling. The whispers came fast. A partner at a firm I'd once clerked for sent a casual message. Hey Gerald, sounds like you've kicked up a storm. Apparently Bradley had been calling around, laying the groundwork. He says you're going through something. That you're not well. Carrying old family baggage. I blinked once. Come. He's trying to paint me unstable? I asked. Exactly, the partner said. He's shopping the narrative. Thanked him. Hung up. Classic Bradley. If you can't bury the truth, discredit the person telling it. He was pulling strings, spinning tales, cashing in favors. But what he didn't realize was this. I'd already walked through fire to get here. And I wasn't afraid to burn what needed burning. And I wasn't stepping back just because Bradley tossed up a smoke screen. I called Delphine. She picked up on the first ring. He's trying to smear me, I said. He's scared, she replied without hesitation. And he should be. There was a pause. I was hoping you'd call. There's something else. 10 minutes later, a file appeared in my inbox. Something I hadn't seen in over a decade. Correction. Something I'd never been allowed to see. It was a scan of an HR complaint from my first job out of law school. I had either forgotten about it, or buried it deep enough that it no longer surfaced. At the time I thought I was being paranoid. I convinced myself it was just bad luck. A missing draft. A leaked pitch. A rejection that came too fast, too perfectly timed. But I couldn't prove anything. Till now. Delphine had saved everything. Email headers. Screenshots. Even a remote login history showing that Bradley, while helping me set up my Wi-Fi during a long Thanksgiving weekend, had accessed my personal laptop remotely. He'd stolen my ideas and pitched them as his own. Not just to anyone, but to a rival firm. And it had nearly cost me my career. Delphine's voice cracked. Your father made me swear not to tell you. Said it would only make things worse. She exhaled. I regret that. I don't, I told her. Not anymore. I didn't call my lawyer. I called a journalist. An old contact. Seasoned. The kind who built a career peeling back polished surfaces and exposing the rot beneath. When I said I had something, she didn't ask for proof. Just said, send everything. By morning, the headline was already live. Real estate exec accused of corporate sabotage, alleged family cover-up surfaces. Within hours, Bradley's firm hit damage control. Clients started pulling contracts. His face disappeared from the website. His Instagram went private. Hank called twice. I didn't answer. Denise left a voicemail, smooth and predictable. You've embarrassed this family. I hope you're happy. We supported you, Gerald, and this is how you repay us. Supported me? They couldn't even spell my name right on a birthday card. I sat in my office sipping coffee, scrolling through emails from strangers. And then, finally, one of them cracked. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in years. I always knew something wasn't right. I should have said something. That's what my aunt's message said. Too late. But I wasn't angry anymore. Just focused. Bradley could spin whatever story he wanted, but this wasn't a courtroom. This was the court of public opinion. And he'd already lost the jury. That night, a message came through from a young woman named Naomi. A former intern of mine, fresh out of law school when she worked under me. She reminded me of myself at that age. Quiet, sharp, invisible in all the ways that don't show up on performance reviews. Her message read, "Thank you. People like you make room for people like me." I didn't smile. Not quite. But something inside me exhaled. They thought I came to burn the house down. Truth is, I hadn't even raised my voice yet. The next morning, I walked into the county clerk's office with a black folder under my arm and decades of revisionist history in my hands. The complaint was ready. Typed. Index. Reviewed word by word. Misuse of trust funds. Forgery of consent. Breach of fiduciary duty. 3 names were listed at the top. Hank Whitmore. Denise Whitmore. Bradley Whitmore. Behind them, all the receipts. Notarized bank statements. Transfer logs. Forged authorization forms, with signatures that didn't match mine. And Delphine's sworn affidavit, confirming the original terms of my mother's will. Specifically, the line that protected my education fund. By noon was filed. By 4 it was online. Available to anyone with a search bar and curiosity. I hadn't declared war. I had simply told the truth. What the world did with that wasn't my responsibility. That evening, Bradley's LinkedIn vanished. His firm issued a vague, carefully worded statement. Mr. Whitmore is currently on leave pending internal review. Translation: he was done. Hank's name disappeared from the Veterans Foundation board. A new line appeared beneath the listing. Position under ethics review. Denise cancelled her beloved winter gala. The official release? In respect of family privacy. Sure. That night Claire texted me. I didn't know it would go this far. I stared at it for a long time. Then replied, "You never asked how far it already went for me." She didn't answer. But the next message came from Hank. For the first time in years. The subject line read, "You are no longer welcome in this family." That was it. The final brick in the wall they'd spent decades building between us. Delivered like a souvenir. A closing gift from people who had long since locked the doors and dimmed the lights. I opened a new email draft. Typed. Paused. Deleted it. Typed again. And then I didn't send it at all. Instead, I picked up a notepad and wrote it out by hand. One line. "You erased me. I'm just finishing the job you started." I read it to myself, folded the page and set it aside. I turned off my phone. There was nothing left to say to them. No more proof to offer. No more begging to be seen. Just space. Real, permanent space. I sat in my office as the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting long shadows through the blinds. Out in the world, the media cycle spun on. Headlines, reposts, speculation. But inside, it was still. Not hollow. Not empty. Just still. The kind of quiet that follows truth finally spoken. And no longer needing to be believed. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner at my apartment. Nothing elaborate. Roast chicken, roasted carrots, and a bottle of wine I'd picked by instinct, not marketing. Delphine arrived early with an apple pie and her calm, grounding presence. One of my interns came with her girlfriend in that nervous kind of joy, wondering if they were overdressed or just young. A friend from my Saturday running group showed up with garlic bread and stories that had nothing to do with lawyers or betrayal. We sat around my kitchen table. Small. Scratched. Blue. No place cards. No tension wrapped in forced smiles. No toasts doubling as judgments. Just people. Just connection. After dessert, Delphine helped me rinse dishes. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Her eyes were enough. Clear, proud. The next morning, I drove alone to a quiet cemetery just outside the city. No flowers. Just a letter. I sat beside my mother's grave and read it aloud. Even if I wasn't sure she could hear it. "I did it, Mom. Kept my spine. I kept your name clean. I'm not under their roof. I'm not under their thumb." The wind stirred the leaves at my feet. I tucked the letter beneath the stone vase, weighted it with a small rock and stood. I didn't cry. I just breathed. And then I left. That afternoon my phone buzzed with a voicemail. I didn't need to hear it. The name on the screen said enough. Denise. But I pressed play anyway, just long enough to catch her tone. "You got what you wanted. We lost everything. I hope you're proud." I stopped it. Deleted it. That wasn't pride she heard in my silence. It was peace. They always thought I was trying to take something from them. But the truth was simpler. I just needed to get myself back. That night, I sat up in bed with a cup of tea, the hum of the heater, and a quiet that felt earned. I glanced around the space I'd built. Not a mansion. Not a showplace. But it was mine. I thought about everything they took from me and everything I'd reclaimed in return. Not all wounds close neatly. Some leave jagged edges, raised scars. That's life. But healing doesn't mean erasing the pain. It means learning how to walk with it without letting it lead. I didn't need closure. I needed clarity. And I had it now. I won't fill my life with people who only show up when they need something. I'll choose solitude over performance. Truth over politeness. Peace over pretense. I choose me. They called me ungrateful. But I'm more grateful than I've ever been. Grateful that I finally stepped away. Because sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. I spent too many years trying to prove I belonged at a table that was never built with me in mind. Trying to be enough for people who'd already decided I wasn't. But here's what I've learned. Peace isn't given. It's created. Family isn't defined by DNA. It's built on respect, honesty, and safety. And healing? Healing doesn't always look like hugging it out. Sometimes it looks like walking out and not turning back. If you're carrying weight that was never yours to bear, Let this be your permission to set it down. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to write your own story. And you don't need anyone's approval to begin. So now I'll turn it over to you. Have you ever had to walk away from your version of family to find yourself? Do you believe silence keeps peace, or just delays the truth? If this story hit close to home, drop a 1 in the comments. Or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't connect, that's okay too. Let me know why. I read everything. And if you're still here, still listening, don't forget to hit subscribe for more stories that speak truth, stir hearts, and remind us we're not alone. Until next time, take care of yourself like someone you love. If you've made it this far, thank you. Truly. I didn't share this story for sympathy. I shared it because for most of my life I stayed quiet. I let people define me, rewrite me, and erase me. But I've learned that silence doesn't protect peace. It just protects dysfunction. Now I want to hear from you. If any part of this story made your chest tighten, if you've ever felt pushed aside, erased, or underestimated, I'd like you to leave a comment. Not for me, but for you. Tell me what part of this hit home. Or leave a message you wish someone had said to you during your hardest moment. And if you've got something to say to me, say it. Share your thoughts, your support, or your hard-earned advice. Because I'll be reading every word. And maybe you're someone who's still in the middle of your story. Maybe you haven't walked away yet, but you feel it coming. Let me tell you, peace isn't found in their approval. It's found in finally giving yourself the life you deserve. It's not too late. Whether you're 40, 60, or 80, it's never too late to choose yourself. Drop it in the comments if you've ever had to build yourself back from someone else's betrayal. Let's fill this space with voices that see each other. Because even when we're alone in our choices, we don't have to be alone in our stories. And if this gave you even a little strength today, share it. Subscribe. Stick around. There's more truth where this came from. Until next time, take care of yourself, with the same compassion you've always tried to give everyone else.